and 61? And which verse is on the verse sheet? 59, 60, or 61? Or both of them? Okay. We'll just read together the Sanskrit for 61 actually, because I think that'll be easier. So let me just read first of all verses 59 and 60. Evam kayena manasa vachasa cha manogatam paracharya mano bhagavan bhaktimat paricharya pumsam amayanam samyag bhajatam bhava vardana shreyo dishatya bimatam yadharma dishu dehinam. Translation: anyone who thus engages in the devotional service of the Lord seriously and sincerely with his mind, words, and body, and who is fixed in the activities of the prescribed devotional methods, is blessed by the Lord according to his desire. If a devotee desires material religiosity, economic development, sense gratification, or liberation from the material world, he is awarded these results. All right, and there is a very short purport by Srila Prabhupada. Devotional service is so potent that one who renders devotional service can receive whatever he likes as a benediction from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The conditioned souls are very much attached to the material world, and thus by performing religious rites, they want the material benefits known as dharma and artha. All right, and verse 61 responsively. Viraktash Chandriya Ratao Bhakti Yogena Bhuyasa Tam Nirantara Bhavena Bhajetada Vimuktaye Viraktas Chandriya Ratao Bhakti Yogena Bhuyasa Tam Nirantara Bhavena Bhajetada Vimuktaye Viraktas Chandriya Rato Bhakti Yogena Bhuyasa Tam Nirantara Bhavena Bhajetada Vimuktaye Viraktas Chandriya Rato Bhakti Yogena Bhuyasa Tam Nirantara Bhavena Bhajetada Vimuktaye. Yarakta Bhakti Yogena Bhuyasa Tam Nirantara Bhavena Bhajetada Vimuktaye Raktas Chandriya Rata Bhakti Yogena Bhuyasa Tam Nirantara Bhavena Bhajetada Virakta Cha, completely renounced order of life. Indriyarata, in the matter of sense gratification. Bhakti Yogena, by the process of devotional service. Bhuyasa, with great seriousness. Tam, unto him, the Supreme. Nirantara, constantly, 24 hours daily. Bhavena, in the topmost stage of ecstasy. Bhajeta, must worship. Adha, directly. Vimuktaye, for liberation. Translation. If one is very serious about liberation, he must stick to the process of transcendental loving service, engaging 24 hours a day in the highest stage of ecstasy, and he must certainly be aloof from all activities of sense gratification. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. There are different stages of perfection according to different persons' objectives. Generally, people are karmis, for they engage in activities of sense gratification. Above the karmis are the jnanis, who are trying to become liberated from material entanglement. Yogis are still more advanced because they meditate on the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And above all these are the devotees, who simply engage in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. They are situated seriously on the topmost platform of ecstasy. Here, Dhruva Maharaj is advised that if he has no desire for sense gratification, then he should directly engage himself in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. The path of apavarga, or liberation, begins from the stage called moksha. In this verse, the word vimuktaye, for liberation, is especially mentioned. If one wants to be happy within this material world, he may aspire to go to the different material planetary systems where there's a higher standard of sense gratification. But real moksha, or liberation, is performed without any such desire. Thus, it is explained in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu by the term Anyabhilashita Shunyam, which also appears in Caitanya Charitamrita Madhya Lila, chapter 19, verse 167, which means without desire for material sense gratification. For persons who are still inclined to enjoy material life in different stages or on different planets, the stage of liberation in Bhakti Yoga is not recommended. Only persons who are completely free from the contamination of sense gratification can execute bhakti yoga or the process of devotional service very purely. The activities on the path of apavaga up to the stages of dharma, artha and kama are meant for sense gratification. But when one comes to the stage of moksha, the impersonalist liberation, the practitioner wants to merge into the existence of the Supreme. But that is also sense gratification. When one goes above the stage of liberation, however, he at once becomes one of the associates of the Lord to render transcendental loving service. This is technically called vimukti. For this specific vimukti liberation, Narada Muni recommends that one directly engage himself in devotional service. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pastutyadeshatane Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Sri Advaita Gadadha Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindubhya evacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. I'll read this verse 61 again. Viraktas chandriya rato bhakti yogena bhuyasa tam nirantara bhavena bhajetadha vimuktaye. If one is very serious about liberation, he must stick to the process of transcendental loving service, engaging 24 hours a day in the highest stage of ecstasy. And he must certainly be aloof from all activities of sense gratification. Yes, so it's Narada Muni is continuing his instructions to Dhruva Maharaj. In the first two verses, 59 and 60, that Narada Muni makes an interesting point. It's, you could say, a preliminary point to what is presented quite strongly in verse 61. And that is that if someone engages in devotional service seriously, sincerely, with mind, words, and body, and fixed in prescribed devotional methods, he says, then such a person is blessed by the Lord according to his desire. His desire means the Lord's desire. His desire means the devotee's desire, not the Lord's desire, because the his doesn't have the capital H. So such a devotee being engaged like that seriously in devotional service is blessed by the Lord according to whatever desire or desires the devotee has. And then the verse elaborates that if a devotee desires dharma, artha, kama, and moksha from the material world, the devotee is given those things. But that's not really what we're trying to do in devotional service, in Krishna consciousness. Ultimately we're trying to achieve pure love for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and ultimately we are not interested At least we should not be interested. And really, the serious devotee is not interested in dharma, artha, kama, or moksha. Not interested. So, this devotee being mentioned here is a mixed devotee. Blessed by the Lord according to his desire, the devotee's desire. Yes. And we actually, I mentioned, not yesterday, what day was it? Maybe it was anyway, one of the days. I mentioned some examples of devotees who, because they were serious devotees, they were not interested. And even though they were offered by the Lord directly face to face those things, but they refused them basically. And, one is the example of Dhruva Maharaj. He hasn't reached that point there. He'll get there in due course. But finally at the end, when he becomes fully Krishna conscious through chanting Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, and he also becomes fully developed in Ashtanga Yoga in relation to fulfilling his material desires of getting a kingdom bigger than his father's. So the Lord comes to him, the Lord appears before him, and the Lord tells him that I have heard that you want a big kingdom. That's what I've heard, so here I am. You want a big kingdom? But Dhruva Maharaj, whose heart has become completely purified through the process of devotional service, or particularly chanting Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, immediately replies that no. Now I've got you. Now I've got your mercy. Then I have realized that big kingdom which initially I was hankering for, practically desperately, just so strongly hankering for, Dhruva Maharaj was ready to do anything, more or less, to get that kingdom, and he did. At 5 years of age, he went to the forest just to somehow get help from God. And of course, 5-year-old children, we all know, basically, 5-year-old children, they're definitely not going to do that. They're definitely not going to do that at all. And if they're separated from their parents, particularly from the mother, at 5 years of age, they're going to become quite frantic, usually. Yes, but Dhruva Maharaj, he was so extremely determined. That is part of the nature, one of the main parts of the nature of a Kshatriya. Extreme determination. Extreme determination. So he just went, okay, I can find God in the forest and he'll fulfill my desire. There, that's it. Off he went. And even Narada Muni, when they first met, Narada Muni said to him, you're just 5 years old. You shouldn't be here in the forest. Why don't you go back to the palace? because Dhruva had told him, I'm looking for God. And Narada said, God is in the forest. God is in the palace also. He's everywhere. He's in the palace too. So why don't you go back to the palace, and you won't have to exist on, an extremely austere diet with extremely austere facilities, like just lying on the floor, on the ground at night. Yeah, it's really very extremely austere to just live in the forest. So why don't you go back to the palace? Because God is there too. You can find him there. And in the meantime, get nice sabji and puris and sweets and all these things and find God. But Narada responded, listen, if you don't want to help me, leave me alone. Because I'm here in the forest to find God, and that's what I'm doing. So then Narada changed his strategy. Yeah. So, yes. So then when Dhruva finally realized the Lord, based on his chanting, and the Lord told him that, right, here we go. You want a kingdom? Just tell me, it's yours. But Dhruva said, no. Now I've realized, now I've met you, I've realized that kingdom which I thought was so extremely valuable, like a pile of valuable jewels, now I can understand that it's simply a big pile of broken colored glass. And broken colored glass, I've mentioned before in this regard, I'm sure some of you will remember, in one of my earliest trips to Russia, one of them, maybe 95, I went to the, East Coast, Vladivostok. And there, the devotees one day took me to a beach. And the beach, it was just rocks, really. Shri Shri Radharadhana Shri Giri Govardhan Shri Caitanya Mahaprabhu Ki Jai. But this beach, believe it or not, was completely covered in broken glass, which had been there for a long time. I don't know if you've had the experience, but glass, glass, of course, if you break a bottle or you break a glass, then it has sharp edges. You easily cut yourself. But after glass, broken glass, has been sitting exposed to the elements long enough, then it loses the sharp edges. And it just becomes, there's just very soft, like that. So this beach was completely covered in colored glass, because apparently a ship which had been carrying bottles of different sorts got shipwrecked just out from the beach, and all the bottles washed ashore and got all smashed up by the surf, and the people just left them there. So it was just like straight out of Srimad Bhagavatam, like a big pile of broken colored glass. That's what it was. And you could see that there was a whole lot of people on the beach. It was the weekend. And none of them were taking the broken glass, like it's valuable. Let's take it home with us. They were just walking over the top of it. That's how Dhruva felt. It's just a waste. It's rubbish. It's just rubbish. Which is true. at least if we're seeing these things in terms of sense gratification. But otherwise the devotee sees that the world, the material world, is full of different items which can be offered to the Lord. So, but anyway, in verse 61, then the points presented in verses 59 and 60 are elaborated on a step further to the point of pure devotional service. That if you're really serious about liberation, first of all, if you're really serious about liberation, then what must you do? You must stick to devotional service 24 hours a day in the highest stage of ecstasy. Well, if you do like that, you'll be in the highest stage of ecstasy sooner or later. And while you're doing that, you have to be aloof from activities of sense gratification. This is essential truth of Krishna consciousness. Srila Prabhupada, first of all, he discusses that there are different stages of perfection or different types of perfections, or even more particularly, different types of things which are considered perfections by different types of people who have different objectives. So Prabhupada runs through the classic four groups. First group is the karmi group, and the great majority of people are karmis, engaged in sense gratification. So for them, their perfection or their idea of perfection is just some great sense gratification. Eat, drink, and be merry non-stop. Just non-stop. And that means that is perfection. For them, at least according to their understanding of the term or the concept, the idea of perfection. But then above the karmis, those are the karmis, but above the karmis are the jnanis. And jnanis, of course, indicates that they're interested in knowledge, jnana. But unfortunately, that jnana is impersonal. So they're trying to cultivate some sort of spiritual knowledge with the goal of becoming liberated from material entanglement, becoming liberated from the same things that the karmis think are the perfection. But the jnanis, at least they can see through that and understand it's definitely not perfection. So they feel that to achieve some sort of impersonal liberation, this is their idea of perfection. But it's not. It's their idea of perfection. So, as Prabhupada said, there are different stages of perfection according to different persons' objectives. It's just relative to the state of the particular person. But then there are yogis who are still more advanced because they meditate on the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Yes, the jnanis are doing jnana yoga, that philosophical analysis of the material nature and of themselves in terms of spiritual nature, but really trying to understand how we are not part of the material nature. And so sometimes we'll find their approach, their idea, their practice is sometimes called neti, na iti becomes neti. Na iti, not this. Neti. Not this, not that, not the other thing. Not meat eating, not intoxication, not sex life, not gambling, not trying to get money, not trying to enjoy material facilities. That's the Jnani's approach, through knowledge, through understanding that yes, this whatever it is, this money is of no use to me in terms of achieving something worthwhile, because all it can get me is temporarily enjoyed material things in this world. And that's just not of any value. So that's the Jnanis, but the yogis, they're generally doing Ashtanga yoga. Ashtanga, a system of yoga with 8 divisions, 8 parts, step by step, from level 1 to level 2, finally up to level 8, which is Samadhi. Yes. And their meditation, their focus is on the Supersoul, the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord, but in the form of the Supersoul. So they may realize the Supersoul, at least if they're really successful in their terms, they'll realize the Supersoul, which is a lot better than just being a Jnani and realizing I'm a spirit soul and I'm different from this material world, therefore I won't involve myself in the material world. But the thing is, there's more to Krishna consciousness, there's more to realizing the Supreme Lord than just realizing the Supersoul. Supersoul is only in the material world, overseeing us in the material world. And you cannot really have a relationship, but definitely not in terms of rasa. You can't really have any sort of relationship with the Supersoul. He's a functional form of the Supreme Lord, essentially there to see that everyone gets their karma. And that's as far as it goes. See, you get your karma, you go to the correct body next lifetime. That's the Supersoul. But when someone goes back to Godhead, then Supersoul stays behind, yes, in the material world. There's no Supersoul in the kingdom of God because everyone is under Krishna himself. So therefore Prabhupada makes the point that the yogis, Ashtanga yogis, even though they're more advanced because they're ultimately at least focusing on Paramatma, but above them are the devotees who they simply engage in devotional service. That's all. So here Narada Muni then is advising Dhruva that, as far as I can see, Anyway, if you have no desire for sense gratification, of course he does, but on the basis of a person not having a desire for sense gratification, that sort of person should directly engage in devotional service. Yes, and Prabhupada refers to the path of apavarga, liberation. It culminates in liberation, at least. The process of Krishna consciousness culminates in the Sanskrit term Prabhupada used was vimuktaye, which means for liberation, but the state is vimukti. Not just mukti. The impersonalists, the jnanis, they're particularly interested in mukti, just plain mukti, not vimukti. It's interesting, let me actually just, while we're at it, because it is interesting, in the 10th canto, 9th chapter, verse 20, which is one of the sort of classic verses about Mother Yashoda, it's part of the Damodar Leela. Nemam virincho nabhavo nashir apyanga samshraya prasadam lebire gopi yatat prapa vimuktidat. Neither Lord Brahma nor Lord Shiva nor even the goddess of fortune, who's always the better half of the Supreme Lord, can obtain from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the deliverer from this material world, such mercy as received by Mother Yashoda. And what is that mercy? It's referred to in the verse itself, that Krishna is vimukti dat, same vimukti, not just mukti, but vimukti dat. Dat means he gives. So Mother Yashoda, vimukti dat, she got special liberation given by Krishna. And Prabhupada makes the point. The word vimukti dat is significant. There are different types of liberation. Sayoga, Sayujya, Salokya, Sarupya, Sarshti, and Samipya. But vimukti means special mukti. When after liberation one is situated on the platform of prema bhakti, one is said to have achieved vimukti, special mukti. Yes. Right. Special mukti, because the prefix, the basic term is mukti. I think we've all heard the term mukti many times before. It means liberation. But V as a prefix means, well, it's a prefix of emphasis like very or special mukti. In this case, just like, what is it? In Bhagavad Gita chapter 4, verse 8, Lord Krishna explains that he comes paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya chaduskritam dharma samstapanartaya dharma samstapanartaya sambhavami yuge yuge. So paritranaya sadhunam, to deliver the devotees, vinashaya chaduskritam, vinash, the duskritanas, the demons. Krishna doesn't just nash them. Nash means to destroy. But Krishna vinashes them. Very destroys them. special distraction. Yes, he really annihilates them, obliterates them, if you know what I mean. Yeah, doesn't simply shoot them, but like he just blows them to pieces, something like that. It's extreme. So special distraction. So in this case, vimukti, special liberation, because the jnanis, the impersonalists, they're just trying to get, and it's rare, but some, they may get mukti, impersonal liberation. They may get impersonal liberation. So the state one achieves through pure devotional service, transcendental loving service to the Lord, is also a liberated state in a broad sense, that as the impersonalists, they have no interest in enjoying this world, enjoying money and enjoying the opposite sex, or all these types of the regular enjoyments, so-called, within this material world. The impersonalists, they're not interested. And the devotees, the pure devotees, are also not interested in enjoying those things in material terms. So therefore they're also liberated. It's not exactly like a totally different state, like the difference between apples and oranges. They're really very, very different. So the liberation of the devotees in certain respects is recognizable in the same terms that the liberation of the impersonalists can be recognized, that great detachment. But actually the liberation of the devotees is much higher. Therefore it's called vimukti and not just mukti here particularly. It's vimukti, special liberation, like a much further developed form of liberation. Because, of course, as we know, the devotee goes back to Godhead and is in the personal association of Krishna eternally. And that's so different from just being free from material attachment. And that's all. Yes, so therefore, this is what Dhruva Maharaj is recommending. Dhruva Maharaj, Prabhupada says, is advised that if he has no desire for sense gratification, then what he should do is directly engage himself in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. Of course, Dhruva Maharaj is not ready for that quite, just to focus directly in devotional service. So he's still got this, he's very, very convinced that he must get the big kingdom. So Narada Muni, he's an expert preacher, expert presenter of Krishna consciousness. So without telling Dhruva that actually what I'm doing, I'm giving you a process which is going to lead to pure devotional service, in which state you will not care about a kingdom. He doesn't say that. He says, this Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, it's part of a process for you to get your kingdom. That's the way he's putting it. So it's a little, I mean, you could say it's slightly dishonest in a sense, but it's not really. It's just he's not telling him. And if you don't tell someone, it's a little different from telling someone something which is wrong. Do you get the idea? I mean, it's sort of, something a bit unusual. But it's not directly lying. You're just, not talking about something. So that's actually what he's doing. And indeed, sometimes devotees, they preach to that to people. They preach like that to people who are just too materially interested to be able to grasp the importance of pure devotional service and then to try to develop it. So, as the previous two verses together said, that for some people, they should practice devotional service, but they have material desires, but they're practicing devotional service, and the Lord will give them the material things they desire. This happens. And of course there's the famous verse, Akama sarva kama va moksha kama udaradi tivrena bhakti yogena yajeta purusham param, that whether a person is akama, desireless, or sarva kama, full of desire, material desires, or moksha kama, desiring liberation, whatever their state is, tivrena bhakti yogena, they should just engage in devotional service. Yajeta purusham param, and worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It will be the best way to get what they want, but ultimately they may get devotional service like Dhruva. And then as they perceive the much greater value of devotional service compared to whatever material things they were interested in, then they'll give up those material things and just engage in devotional service. That is what is being hoped for in that verse. Not just, here's a nice way to get whatever material things you want. But the hope is, in the long run, the person will appreciate the value of devotional service. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Any comments or questions? Any comments, words of wisdom?
Sorry I haven't been able to be here. Doctor said I needed bed rest and not rush off to all the programs and do things. So, but I loved it when I came in. You were talking about that liberations, we get to go back to Godhead, to be with Krishna. And it's in the dream I had, Prabhupada came to me and he said, he grabbed my hands and said,
use the mic.
I'm sorry. He said, I'll always be with you. And he said, he touched my head and said, I'll always be in your mind. And he touched my heart and said, I'll always be in your heart. And when you die, I will come back to get you and take you back to be with me and Krishna in the spiritual world. And it's such because I made so many mistakes. I'm not pure devotees like Bhakti Caitanya Swami and Bhakti Taru Swami and so many of the others, but I continue trying, and that's the thing that we never want to give up. We always do try to improve and practice what we can, and if we made some mistakes, we just keep going forward.
If at first you don't succeed, try again. Okay, thank you. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Oh, okay.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. How do we overcome, sometimes we have this tendency, you've mentioned before in a class, to desire liberation still. In our service we want to get liberated from something. How do we get rid of this desire for liberation?
For liberation. Yes. Well, a good start is to cultivate our understanding of Krishna consciousness more and more, and then it'll become more clear to us that liberation, just in the sense of becoming free from different material, not just different material things, particularly things which aren't nice. We realize we'll become more convinced, at least, that actually to achieve like what Shuddhi Prabhu is achieving, of going back to Godhead and being with Prabhupada and Krishna there eternally, this is much better than just becoming free from different problems, like the disease problem and the death problem and these problems of material life. Because it's interesting in Christianity that they're really, even though they've got an idea of going to what they call heaven, they're not really clear what it is, but it's some sort of higher existence. But they're very concerned about getting salvation, which basically means liberation. Yeah. And they don't understand the difference between just salvation, freedom, from all the troubles, and actually being with the Supreme Lord, engaged in His pure devotional service. So, yes, there has to be a process. I mean, there naturally is, if we practice Krishna consciousness nicely and study the literatures and think about them, then it will just naturally become apparent that we really don't need to worry about liberation. By becoming Krishna conscious, we're going to get liberation anyway, just as a byproduct. And it's not something we have to really think, how am I going to get it? How does that sound? Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.